Yes.
I'm sorry if I'm just woefully uneducated on this. You mentioned that there was compulsory, the film division's works were compulsory viewing. Up to what year was that?
I didn't get.
Where would a film like this have been seen?
So till 1996, you had almost 1,200 theaters in India. 12,000 theaters had to compulsory show. Now the number 12,000 theaters screens is a very weird number, because out of that, at least 1/3 are traveling theaters that would roam in the villages. So you could say that close to about 6,000 to 7,000 screens in India were showing, but there were static scenes, would have to show films division.
So I get that, like for the newsreel or for a short film, but for the longer films also?
Sometimes.
Okay.
But mostly it was, there is a version of this film which is a 22-minute version.
And so do you know what kind of feedback these films received?
Well, I don't know about this film, but there was, I have access to a report that was produced, not a report, it's a report produced by Air India in 1968. It's like, which has a stunning sociological survey done in Punjab about how people are viewing films division. This film, and it has a very, it seems like it's been done by Air India, so they are very happy that this is great. People are responding and people are changing and so forth. I'm skeptical of that, but there are very, very few such. I haven't really gone into the National Archives as yet, and I've been trying to figure out the Films Division has an archive of their old stuff. Films Division doesn't, I don't know, I think whatever I've heard, it's probably lost. So it'll be amazing to study what is happening in the letters being transferred back and forth in the 60s, and I don't have access to it. Whatever I've spoken about is essentially a close reading of the film and a little bit of access I have. Yes?
Ashish, I didn't understand, were there two censors of these films, and was Films Division the first to censor it and then?
No, Films Division is not censoring. Films Division is deciding. It's not censoring. This film, India 67, got caught in that being sequence. And Indira Gandhi was shown this film, and she said it's fine. Because Indira Gandhi had met Sukhdev soon after Miles ago. He was already well known. And when this film was caught up by censor board, I think it was through Ashok Mitra that he got to Indira Gandhi, and there was a screening in Delhi. And I think I probably
you know more about that.
that got passed. Yeah. Yes.
Is there an explanation of his transition from someone who's critiquing the state to?
I can tell you my understanding of his explanation. Yeah. He has been Sukhdev, whatever little I have never met him obviously, and I only know him through his films. And I'm working completely as a historian, and I have some access to some text written about him in newspaper or on business. He seems to be an extraordinary, intense man with very strong political views, which is not definitely he's not a party member of any kind. He is influenced by Vinoba, and he makes this film on Vinoba. And then he is also very interested in the Marxist. And at that time, it's not unusual in Bombay in the 60s. If you're smart, intellectual, you have to be left. Right? If you're not, then you're in mainstream stuff. So he's meeting all these guys at Cafe Azmi. Ritik Ghatak is around the time. I don't know, I haven't read, but I'm sure he's also hanging out with Ghatak, probably together drinking. And so I think he's very well aware of the left. And so after emergency, what happens? There are two groups. Like Vinoba Bhave supports emergency. Communist Party of India, CPI, not CPI-M, but CPI also supports emergency. So there are a bunch of people who are supporting emergency. And there is a film that he made, a series of films he made two films against the big railway strike of 1974, when he goes around talking to people. He seems extraordinarily earnest that this railway strike will destroy the country, and he's going around. It's again one of the earliest documentaries in India where the filmmaker is himself in the footage talking to people. And he goes around in Calcutta, in Howrah station, he's talking to people. So what do you think if the strike happens? How will you go back home? And there are these middle class guys saying, oh, I have to move back home, there's a job. Then he goes to the coal mines in Durgapur and Asansol, and he's talking to the laborers. So he's really earnest in his belief that something like the railway strike, which is what eventually causes the emergency, would disrupt the nation. And then he makes this film. I think the only film that I have access through my archive, through what I've been, is this film on bonded labor in Bihar in 1976. It's an extraordinary film on bonded labor. Extraordinary. He goes to these villages. He's talking to these bonded laborers. He's also get access to these zamindars. And because of the film, one of the zamindars get arrested. So he preempts the political interventionist filmmaking practice of Anand much earlier. The only difference I would think is that he is supportive of emergency because he really thinks, like a lot of people in India at that time, that this is good. These guys, the nation needs to be disciplined. This is what we know about this thing. So I think there is a problem in the larger history of emergency that because of what has happened after emergency, there are only two sides to emergency, either with it or against it, you're totally on the other side. But there's an ambivalence also. And there were a number of people, number of politicians, number of intellectuals who were not sure what was happening. And I think Sukhdev is one of those people and also he becomes close to Indira Gandhi, especially after 9 months to freedom. And I think he believes that what Indira Gandhi is doing is correct.
It's also a matter of hindsight. I mean, if he had been around in the 90s, he would have had a different view.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a number of people who supported emergency over the years. And, yeah, so it's unfortunate that he died early, but.
He died a very sad man too. I guess at that time he did know that the choices he had made or the people he had supported, it was wrong.
Yeah, that happened.
So he did get into a lot of depression at that period.
Soon after.
Suffered a heart attack. Yeah, when BJP came.
Janata Dal.
And he fell out with Sanjay Gandhi.
I need to sit and talk to you guys. I've just been. For me, what I've spoke is just my reading of the film and few texts that. And when I saw this film, I'm just amazed that something like this was made in the 60s. Yes.
In terms of co-option, even the second film, there is this element where you see he's more comfortable with the opulence of the middle class and the upper middle class. It's sophisticated, but in the first film it was much more stark. There's this image of poverty and there's the image of opulence. The dance scene, where they're dancing in a party and then there's this guy who's giving pleasure to himself. In the second film, there is a tendency that he's more comfortable with the opulence. He's not completely accepting it, but he's more comfortable with it. He's not critiquing in that stark manner that he's doing.
No, I'm not sure if I would put it as he's comfortable with opulence. That's what I think. I think it's more. The reason I think India 67 is a far more sophisticated film is that it is ambivalent, and that ambivalence is it's very, according to me, and this is I'm talking as a filmmaker now, I think it's very easy to say, to have the villain and you have the hero and you create a narrative. It's far more difficult to create a narrative in which things are very hazy, and I think that's what he does in that film. Yes, you have Hussain in it, but you have Balasaheb Thackeray, you have you have Kaifi Azmi, and then you also have that sequence, which is kind of weird sequence, very 1960s, this villainish looking man, and they're dancing in some kind of a party. So I think I would hesitate to say that he's comfortable with opulence. I think he's more self-aware of his own subjectivity, which is why I think the sequence in which he puts himself in this village is just brilliant. I think that's the key element. I think it requires a lot of, and he was castigated for doing that. He was told that how you can have yourself in the film, how you can have this kind of a dramatic, this is supposed to be a documentary, this is how can you have this. So I think he's extraordinarily aware of his own problems, and I think he puts himself brilliantly in that. And that's why I think, one of the reasons why I think this is just It's a brilliant film. Yes.
I was just going to say that one thing that is interesting is that when you look at filmmakers from our generation, how we approach some of the problems around us with a singular subject matter. What was really interesting in this film was just how brave the filmmaker is to explore such a range of subject matters and deal with juxtaposing them, which really kind of brought about a spirit and an energy of him as a filmmaker exploring the film form, like you pointed out, even to the point where he shows himself going to his home. So the kind of range of things that are being associated and dealt with gives the film a very personal quality in and of itself, because I don't know if I'm being very clear, but it becomes easy to hide when you choose one subject matter, one consistent space. But there's something quite brave about that approach.
I completely agree with you, Shimon, that this is when I look at this film, I think it's to make a film like this in 1967 with all these things. I think if you give me $100,000, I don't think I'll make a film like this now. It's a very brave film. It's a very brave film with a very forthright point of view, and which is ambivalent. The forthright is the ambivalence. Constantly he's showing these airplanes flying and he's cutting into a bullocks. He's just constantly doing this.
Yeah, how did he have access to HAL and HMT?
This is film division.
And especially like Vaitana Dam.
Yeah, he's doing everything. He gets into
nuclear reactor.
He gets into Baba. He gets into trauma. He gets everywhere. He has access.
You can go and shoot everywhere.
Yeah, if you're an FD, you also can shoot. This photography is not allowed.
You see telecom, you're privileged to see that automation.
Yeah, it's because it's. I think if he would be making this film on his own, he would not have access. He was able to do it because
the government did it.
It's a government film. That's the brilliant story. It's a government film which is critical of the government.
Then it shows these planes flying with these bullet cards. I mean, speed and.
Yeah, I mean, like, in fact, I'm not going to make. It's not a direct analogy, but I have another thing I think about is that if you look at Soviet cinema, of the 60s, East Europe, they're all state-funded films, and they moved to one of the finest films in the history of cinema have come from Soviet East Bloc state-funded films. So what I see in Sukhdev is that, and also with money and a whole bunch of filmmakers who are working, have constantly worked with film division, is to take the state's money and to kind of
use it to show that.
Yeah. And I think in this case, it's both the courage of the filmmaker to do that, and also the people who are around him letting him do that. I think that's a story that we very often tend to forget. Like somebody like Manipal can make Siddheshwari in 1989. It's like crazy. I mean, as a matter of fact, if you go to an independent producer and kind of however enlightened that he is, if you say that I want to make a film like India 67, give me enough money to expose 1 lakh of 35mm. No, and I think that's. And I think what Shumana is saying is something very interesting, is that this is a very brave film.
Yeah, actually as students of cinema, watching this film several times and now watching it in the theatre, you see the levels of narrative, not just the visual, but even the sound.
Oh my God, the sounds, I didn't even know
I
that.
said,
I didn't,
when you're watching.
I didn't get into the sound at all, yeah.
So I just wanted to add, you started by saying the language of irony, and then you went on to say he was ambiguous. I'm not sure I agree with the word ambiguous, because for me that moment when the clothes are being distributed and you have a village full of blue clothes, blue frocked girls, there's no ambiguity. This is such scathing irony. My gosh, it's incredible. I know I'm sort of nitpicking with your word, but again,
it underlines it.
Yeah, because I feel that he is really playing around. So his didactic, his language of didacticism in the first film, he has sort of built up into this dense kind of, my God, it's razor sharp.
Absolutely. I think that's what is, and for those of us who, at least some of us, I think, started thinking of documentary filmmaking when we saw Anand's Bombay Hamara Shehar, and then
Jaru showed me this.
And then you figure out, oh my God, where is Anand coming from? And then you see Sukhdev. I said, you know now very clearly the genealogy of Anand's film.
Are you
Any more questions?
I spoke about freedom, Bangla, 9 months ago.
9 months to freedom is another ballgame, right?
Fantastic.
It's stunning. And also in 9/12 film was also this other footage that he gets from the.
Actually, I should share an anecdote.
Sure, sure.
Somebody, a journalist asked him, what did you get by making this film? You know,
1967. It was 9 months.
9 months to complete. And he said a heart attack. He actually did something. How much you want them to mark.
So this
He
is
would
without
make a
moviola.
Nothing. Just he would actually do it and just he would know how many seconds each turn of the synchrometer. And actually did that. And then he would take it to Ramnot, which was very close to our house. And he would just see the cut. And then decide, make some minor changes, and that was his final. And then he knew it because he had shot a lot of it. I mean, most of it he had shot. So he knew exactly what was there. He had shot most of it. So much from Bangladesh, most of it. I'm just thinking how he would have done it. I mean, he used to edit day and night. I know that too.
No, I think the filmmakers who part of who come from that tradition of Eisenstein and all that would do this. I mean, you have so much of that they would do this. They would look at the footage. It's really hard work.